Hi everyone, welcome back. We are going to be doing more trig. I hope you are doing well and adjusted with distance learning. So today our focus will be on frequency and period of the sine and the cosine graph. You'll be able to identify what those two are, and you'll be able to know the definition of a frequency and a period. Now, just to get us started, we're going to do a quick review of what everything you should know by now. And one of the things when you look at one of these graphs here, when you look at this graph, or equation I should say, you should be able to identify a few things. For one thing, you should be able to identify the amplitude, and that is the absolute value of the equation, of the coefficient to the trig equation. Okay? Sorry I abbreviate, but I just gotta make space. Okay? Then there's also, you should be able to identify what the center, or what's also called the midline, both of those, doesn't matter. And that is the constant that is added or subtracted. And it is also known as a vertical shift. Okay. Other thing that you should be able to find is the max, that is the center plus the amp. And then there's also the min, that is the center minus the amp. And of course, that leads you to the range, and the range, and that is just the min, y in the middle, the max, and don't forget they're equal to as well. And that's that. Okay, so now look at your first one here, and what is the amp? That is the absolute value of the coefficient. This is your coefficient, so it's 3. The center, that is the number by itself. That is the 1, the midline. The max is the center plus the amp. The min is the center plus minus the amp. So here this is 4, this is -2. And the range is from -2, the y values, of course don't put those little lines here, to 4. So I like to graph all this. So I'm going to start with when I graph, I make a little sketch of these three numbers, my center, my max, and my min, just to make sure it all looks really well. So I start with my center, and that is 1. I make a little dash going along. And this is going from -2. So if this is 0, that's 1, that's -2. This is 0, that's 1. That's 2, that's 3, and that's 4. And I make sure that my amp is matching this, because my amp is 3, so this is going up 3 and down 3, so that's perfect. Okay, now how do I graph this? Well, when I graph it, I'm going to use a different color. When I graph it, I know that this is a sine graph, and it's positive in front of the amp. So it's positive sine graph. So when it's a positive sine graph, I don't need that, because it's positive, I know it's going to start with O, because it always starts with O, and then it's going to go to max, and then it's going to go to O, then it's going to go to min, and then it has to end in O. Remember, it starts and finishes the same. And when I say O, that means the center. So O, hit your max, O, that's the center again for the next one, and then go to the min, and then go back to O. Like that, okay? And at the end, you always just mark where that ends. And as far as you guys know, that's 2 pi. But the reason that's 2 pi, I'm going to start telling you about, is that that's called a period. A period is when a full cycle is over. Like in class, we have a periods take, each period is about 41 minutes. So that's when one full max o minno whatever, or o max o minno finishes. there are periods everywhere. Like even just, I don't get weird, but the women's cycle also, it's usually about 28 days. That's when the period is over, right? So that's kind of how that, what that period means. So let's look at this next one. This next one is, look at the amplitude. What is the amplitude? Good, I'm glad you didn't say 3 because it should be 2. The amplitude is 2, but it's not -2 because there's a little minus there. Amplitude is the absolute value. So you have to remember that that's positive 2, okay? I don't want this color for here, so I'm just going to use that. So 2. The center would be the number, the coefficient, the constant that's by, not the coefficient, the constant that's by itself. So that's 3. So the max, remember, starts with the center, so it's 3 plus the amplitude, 3 minus the amplitude. Okay, and then the range is just from 1 to, it's these two, so it's just from 1 to 5. Okay, so I start with my center is my midline, 1, 2, 3. And then from there, I'm going to go up, the max is going to be up at 5, and the min is going to be down at 1. So I make sure those are all marked. Now to graph this, I'm going to graph this also in red. Now to graph this, I know that this is a cosine, but it's a negative cosine. So that means it's a reflection over, so that's a reflection. So everything's a little bit backwards. So you know how we normally go max, O, min, O, max? This time it's min, O, then max, O, then min. Starts and ends the same. So I start with min, O, max, O, min. Don't allow it to be pointy. Remember, this curve goes, I like to do the center first, the center area. And then remember, this curve has to be like smiling up, like it was going to plan to go back up. And this is going to like plan to go back up. It doesn't. Okay, whatever this ends here, this is the ending of it. We mark that as 2 pi. Now, you can mark all the other ones if you want and say what they are, but you don't have to. So, I mean, you can, but you don't have to. So I'm gonna let it be so we can move on. Now, over here, this is talking about what the period is. I told you a period is when one full cycle is done. 1 O max O min O, or in this case, max O min O max. That's one full cycle. So in this case, one full cycle is when it goes from O max O min O. So that's one full cycle. That's how long it is. It repeats again here, you'll see the cycle repeat over and over again. So that's how long a full cycle is. It actually has a formula. So the formula is here, is this. This is the formula. It has a little b that looks like it's a weird b. It's called beta, but it just means that little beta there, that's called the frequency. So I can't really talk about period without talking about frequency. So the frequency is that number that's in front of x, where the angle would go. That number in front of x. Normally the number you've had in front of x, like when you did y cosine x, that number in front of x is a 1. Okay, so when that is 1, that means the frequency is 1. The b is 1. Okay, and if you apply the formula that I'm showing you, the period is 2 pi over 1. Which means the period ends at 2 pi, which is why all our graphs that you did before, the period kept ending at 2 pi. See that? It would end at 2 pi. So that's what that's about, okay? So you have to be able to find that period each time. So let's go through this. So if you graph, or not graph, if you follow through what it says here, is it says identify the frequency and the period. When you are given an equation, you identify the frequency first to be able to calculate the period. So when I look at this, I know there's an amp and all that. I just need the frequency. So B, which is my frequency, is 3. Okay, that's my frequency. So if you want to write underneath that my frequency is 3, great, you can do that. Okay, but in order to get my period, which is where the graph ends, I need to do 2 pi over that frequency. Okay, so if you do this graph, this O max, O min, O graph, whatever, it ends at 2 pi. The ending of the graph is this, okay? Or the full cycle, I should say. Okay, so now here, what's my B here? I know it looks very complicated, but remember, it's that number in front of x. If I was to distribute, that would still be the number in front of x. So that's 2. So my frequency is 2. So my period is 2 pi over 2, which can be simplified to just pi. So that whole curve ends at the end of pi. So when you finish drawing your graph, you're going to write pi at the end of the cycle. Here, what's my B? Now do not put x's in there. There should be no x's. So when you look at this, there's a little 1 over there. So this is 1 over 3. So my period is 2 pi over 1 over 3. You should simplify that, so make sure you do. So that would be the same as saying 2 pi divided by 1/3, right? And if you remember keep, change, flip, you keep the first one, you make division into multiplication, and then you flip it, the fraction. So you multiply across, so you can consider that like over 1, and then you say, oh, that's 2 pi times 3 is 6 pi. And 1 times 1 is 1, so this is 6 pi. So my period is 6 pi. Okay, my period was pi here, and my period was this fraction over here. Okay, that's how that works. Now to apply it to our graphs. All right, I did one that you should be able to do. It's very familiar, so get started with that. Find out what, I'm gonna put the axes in soon, but before I do that, what's the amplitude? 3. What's the center? 1. What's the max? That's the center plus the amp. The min, that's the center, minus the amp, so that's -2. And the range. Good. Now there's 2 more added things that you're going to have to do. So find the frequency. That's the number in front of x, right? So that's 1. And the period. The period is 2 pi over the frequency, so that's just 2 pi. So now when you graph this time your axes are not drawn, so you have to draw them. So I could try using this. I never use this. I'll try it. Sure, I'll do that one. Okay, so the center, since my min and my max are between -2 and 4, just want to make room for that, so I guess I'll just do it here. Oh, that looks pretty nice. No? That's it? All right, and then I'll do it again. All right, I don't know how to get rid of that. All right. Oh, that looks pretty nice. Okay, so now, that's there, but now I gotta just draw my little line to graph this. So I'm gonna put my center in. My center is at 1, so that's here. I draw a little dash line. You know I like to do that. My max and my min, I like to do these numbers. My min, here's 0, and here's -1, and here's -2. And then I go up 2, 3. Oh, I don't want to write that one. I don't like doing that. So 2, 3, 4. Good. And so I start at I look at the fact that this is a positive cos. So since it's positive cosine, then I start with max and I end in max. So I go max, O min, O max. So I go max, center, min, center, max. I draw this, and at the very end on my axes, because this is my x-axis, I put what the period is, 2 pi period. That's always the period when the full cycle's over. Okay, that's it. Now for this next one. Okay, so I'll put the lines in later. Let's see, what's the amplitude? My amplitude, 1. My center, 2. My max is my center plus the amp. It's my center minus the amp. Okay, my range is from 1 to 2, 3. My frequency now. This time my frequency is 3. And my period is 2 pi over 3. Okay, and then we're going to do a comparison of this. So let's get my little lines. I'm going to use my line thing that I like so much. Yep, I'll keep it red, that's fine. And since this is going from 1 to 3, I don't really need that much on the bottom here. So I'm just going to move that over like that. And then do it like this. Okay, good. Okay, then I go back to graphing. All right, so now this time I want it to be, I like it red. Okay, so my midline is going to be where? I'm gonna make that purple. My midline is at 2. Make a nice dashed line. I graph that this is going up to from 1. So there's 1. And then I gotta go to 3. So it's 2, 3. So just these 3, you know? Okay, so now I see that it's a positive sign. So it starts at O, and it's gonna go max O, min O, and end at O, right? So that doesn't change, all right? So I go to O at my center. I go to max, I go to O, I go to min, I go to O. I just, on my axes, graph, this is my x-axis, and I just say what the period is, 2 pi over 3. I don't call that 2 pi anymore. That's 2 pi over 3 because it's not the same period as you usually have, which is 2 pi, right? So you might say, well, that's kind of weird, 2 pi over 3. It's only a fraction of 2 pi, that full 2 pi, right? So what would happen? I mean, you don't have, this is one full curve and that's all you had to graph, but what would happen if you kept going? Like if you just kept going, O max, O min, like here's one full curve, and I go max, O, min, O, and you kept going. You don't have to. I'm just kind of like showing it to you. And that's another, that would be another 2 pi over 3. 2 pi over 3 plus another 2 pi over 3 would be 4 pi over 3, right? And if I was to keep going, max, O, min, O, here we go. It would end up here, right? So that would be plus another 2 pi over 3. So that would be 6 pi over 3. Wait, 6 pi over 3 reduces to 2 pi. Well, that makes perfect sense because that is what the frequency is. In this one, the frequency is 3. Frequency is how many I will see from 0 to 2 pi. So frequency is the number of full curves you see from 0 to 2 pi. Notice the higher frequency has more oscillations. So this frequency was 3. So I see 1, 2, 3 from 0 to 2 pi. I know we only had to graph one full curve, so we were really done after we did this part. Like you didn't have to keep going. After you did this, you were pretty much done. This first part, sorry. This part up to this is all you needed to do. But I just wanted to point out what's happening. And if you look at this one, the top one, the frequency is how many full curves do you see from 0 to 2 pi? 1. That is why the frequency is 1. Okay, they all go together. Okay, so let's go into the next one. See how that one works out. So, let's see. What's the amplitude? Amplitude's a number in front of the sine curve. That's positive 1 because it doesn't matter that it's negative. It's positive. The center. There is no number at the end. So that center is 0. The x-axis, the max is going to be, that's going to be your center plus the amp, your center minus the amp. I don't know why I did that. And so this is going to be 1 and negative 1. Your range and your frequency is going to be the number in front of sine. In front of the angle. So I'm looking at this right here to get my frequency. And I don't want to say x over 2, I say 1 over 2. No x's in there. So my period is a little annoying. My period is 2 pi over the frequency. So that is the same as I keep the first one, I change division to multiplication and flip. So that's 4 pi. So my period is 4 pi. So I'm going to graph this. I'm going to draw my little linesies. I like those. Okay. I'm going to make room there. I don't really need to go that far. And I am going to draw my, I don't need to draw my center. My max and my min is pretty straightforward. So my max is at 1. This is at negative 1. Right? This is a sine, a negative sine. Right? So that means it's a reflection over the x. So I go O, and instead of going max, why is it doing that? So instead of going, so I go O, instead of going max, I go to min. O, max, O. So I started O, min, O, max, O. Okay? And this time I mark this, don't you do 2 pi, you write 4 pi. 4 pi. And that's it, you're done. And that's a 4 pi. And now just notice, please, what the frequency is. The frequency is a half. When you get to 2 pi, where would 2 pi be on this graph anyway? 2 pi would be, well, right there. And you don't have to write, if this is 4 pi, certainly this would be 2 pi halfway over. And are you seeing half the graph from 0 to 2 pi? That's what you're seeing. So that is why it is that way. Okay? Let's try the next one. Amplitude. Let's do it. Amplitude's a number in front of sine. Don't say 4. What's the amplitude? 1. Okay? The center, that's 4. The max, min. So that's 5, 3. So this is 3. And the frequency is the number in front of sine. In front of the x. So it's 2. And the period, 2 pi over 2 pi. Okay, let's get this done. So since this is going from 3 to 5, it's really up there, so I don't really need much. Okay, all right. So now I start at my midline. My midline's at 1, 2, 3, 4. And my range, because the amplitude's just 1, and this is 5. So I like to mark this, my center, with a little dash line. Okay, now I'm just going to graph it. So since it's a sine curve, negative sine curve, remember, so it is the reflection because of the negative. So I start at O, I'm going to go down to min, to O, to max, to O. And right there, that's the end of the curve. I go back to my axes, my x-axis, and I mark that with my period, because that's when one full cycle is done, my period. You can say period if you want, but you don't have to. Now, if they say, hey, yeah, graph one full cycle, you are done. I wasn't very specific about it, but if they say, hey, graph it all the way to 2 pi, you will be like, well, that's 1 pi, right? 2 pi, if this is 4 boxes, I would just keep going. This is, just keep going. So I said O min O max O, and then this, if that's 1 pi, this is 2 pi, okay? I don't remember the specific instructions, so we were good with this, but it's good to know how that works. There's 2 full curves from 0 to 2 pi. Okay. All right, so now, what is the meaning of frequency in these graphs? And I just go into that. B is B beta is what we use, and it's the frequency is how much of the curve you will see from 0 to 2 pi. Now the frequency, the formula for frequency is 2 pi over the period, or B is 2 pi over the period. So it's just kind of like the other one. I just always remember, hey, it's 2 pi over the other guy. That's how I remember one, whether frequency or period, it's 2 pi over the other is the one way I remember it. So 2 pi is always on top. That makes it nice and easy. So identify the frequency for each one. Now some people are good at just seeing the frequency, but I like to go work with the period, because you can see the period easier. So when one full cycle finishes. So you go on your graph and you start to highlight it and you start saying in your head, I'll do it in the marker. So I go O max, O min, O. They start and end the same, right? So that means that's right there. That looks like it's supposed to say pi. I wrote too much there. Yeah, I think that's supposed to be pi. So right, so because this is 2 pi, right? So that's pi. So the period is pi. So the frequency, which is the same as B, is 2 pi over pi, which means it's 2. The frequency is 2. Okay? Okay, so, and that makes sense. Some people look at it and they're like, yeah, Mrs. Grace, whoever I graph 2 full curves by the time I get to 2 pi. If you see that, that's fine too. You don't have to write all this. This is just to help you, okay? So, look at this next one. The period, now this one's a little different, like it looks weird. The period is 4, okay? It's not like a pi or anything like that. That can happen. So in this case, the period is 4. So frequency is easy. It's 2 pi over 4. 2 pi over the period. So it's just pi over 2. So it's a little bit of a strange frequency. It's like 3.14 over 2. So the frequency is a little weird. But it's actually more normal in life to be doing these than to be doing numbers like this than pi and 2 pi, right? Let's look at this one. I mean, this one, they're not saying that this is 45 degrees, 90 degrees, 1/3. I have no idea what those numbers are. So I just assume that those numbers, those can be days. Like that can be 180 days. I don't know. So I'm going to keep that just that is, and I'm just going to say, what is my period? My period is when one full cycle is done. One full cycle in this graph is 180, whatever it is. So my frequency is 2 pi over 180. So it's pi over 90. Okay? It may look like degrees, but I cannot make that assumption. Right? So that's it. That's how you find the frequency. A lot of times they give you a graph and they say find the frequency, right? And we're going to go back and write the equations to all these. But right now I just want to make sure you can find the frequency. All right, we did them, okay? So now let's go back and write the equation. So now that's a little, did I ask you to write the equation? Yeah, I did ask you to write the equation. So now we're just going to write the equation. So now that you have this, let's write the equation. I'm going to use red. So the equation is coming up with, like, you have to find what the amp, the frequency, you have to go backwards a little bit, okay? So in order to go backwards, you would need to know what the amp is. So the amp in this case is 2. We already have the frequency. We needed that. What else do we need on our equations? Our equation, since this is a sine curve, is y equals a sine bx plus c. That's the formula. So y is, I have my amp is 2 and it's positive, sine. My b is my frequency is 2x, and c is my center. The center is at 0, so I don't need to write that. There it is. Let's go to this equation. So it's a sine curve. So y equals a sine bx plus c. Y equals, what's my amp? Amp is 5. That's how high it goes from the center. 5 sine, my frequency is pi over 2 x, and my center is 0. So I don't need to write anything there. And the last one. This one's a cosine. So y is a cosine bx plus c. So y is, my amp is from the center 4. My center is 0. So this is 4 cosine. I have my frequency plus 0. I don't need that. Okay. So in conclusion, what is the period and its formula? What do you guys say for that conclusion? The period is the, if you want to say length or width, whatever, of one full cycle. And the period formula is 2 pi over whatever the frequency is. Okay? The frequency is how many full curves exist from 0 to 2 pi. It's the easiest way to say that. And the frequency formula is 2 pi over the period. That's it. 2 pi over the other guy. I hope you have a better understanding of frequency and period and how they go together. At this point, you will know everything about trig graphing, and it's a good time to start practicing because you got to put it all together. Okay. Hope you are well, stay healthy, and have a good day.